This area right here where we are, Obadiah Holmes and 35 other patentees came to this area. Obviously, there was religious persecution in New England, and so that was one of the reasons they came this way. They had religious freedom in Rhode Island, which is where some of these fellows came from, but this was a great area to farm. Obadiah Holmes didn't stay here very long, but he was one of the original patentees of what was called Middletown. The whole big area was called Middletown. It was originally called Baptist Town.
Wow.
And of those 36 patentees, 18 of them were Baptists. Some were Presbyterian, some were Episcopalian. Many of those were married to Baptist women. So you know they had to come.
Yeah.
This is Holmdel.
You are the man.
So this is named after the Holmes family.
Back the whole town, right? Holmdel.
Yeah, named after Obadiah Holmes, what they called him the martyr from Boston. Obadiah Holmes' son, Jonathan, stayed here in the area. We were at Cohansey earlier this week. Obadiah Holmes Jr., which is the youngest son of Obadiah Holmes, migrated down there and started that church. Two things I wanted to point out. Of the 13 original states, 3 of them have the distinction of not having any religious persecution. I'm not saying there wasn't religious struggle, but there was no religious persecution. First of all, you'd understand that would be Rhode Island, then New Jersey, then Pennsylvania. Another distinction that New Jersey has is, according to the Baptist historians that I've read, is that every piece of property that they obtained in New Jersey, they purchased. In other words, there was no persecution against the Indians in obtaining the land. Now, does that make sense? We've got Baptist people coming here and saying, we don't own this, we'll buy it from you.
Yeah, right. Amen. Good.
And they got that from Roger Williams.
Amen. That's good.
Let me share this with you. This is again from Griffith's History of the Baptists in New Jersey. I want you to listen to this very carefully. The parsonage for Holmdel and for Middletown is here. And from this parsonage, pastors went out from this parsonage. In other words, they had this property, and they'd bring these preachers in, and that's where they would house them. And here's what they did. It says that from Holmdel, pastors went from there to their scattered flock, and grouping them into mutuality, laid the foundations of many Baptist churches. From the first, these Baptists did not limit themselves. Houses of worship were built in distant parts, and periodic appointments were made to which the people would travel 30 miles on foot or on horseback along bridle paths, taking their children with them. This in part explains why long sermons came into fashion. Those who made these sacrifices were not content with the taste of the word, nor with platitudes. They wanted substance and plenty of sound doctrine, something to think of for a month or months, and not milk and water diet. Goes on to say, Upper Freehold became the center whence Middletown pastors radiated from the ocean to the Delaware River and to far south of Trenton, covering a vast territory. So what we have is just a handful of preachers. They're going out and they're preaching, and many times they're pastoring more than one church at a time. He goes on to describe the different churches that were founded as a result of this. Now, this is the grave of Asher Holmes. Now, help me out, preacher.
Asher was a colonel in the Revolutionary War. He was the recruiter for all of Monmouth County. He fought in 3 different battles: the Battle of Princeton, the Battle of Monmouth, and another one. There was also a skirmish up here where several of his soldiers were killed. And he was involved with the Joshua Huddy incident, which you may know about, where there was a man. He was killed by the British soldiers unjustly, and then the Revolutionary soldiers, George Washington, took one of the British soldiers and was going to kill him in retribution, but spared his life, which became a real model for what this country stands for. But he met with George Washington around that, so he was a very prominent person.
He's either the grandson or the great-grandson of Holmes. Now please bear in mind, remember we're at the last church, and Obadiah Holmes was a part of the beginning of that church. Now this is about 75 years later, and here his grandson is in this church, in this area, and believe me, he hasn't forgotten about his grandpa. He hasn't forgotten about what his grandpa had done for our nation. And if he didn't forget about what his grandpa did for our nation, I assure you, everybody else in this area understood and remembered what his grandpa had done for this nation. But I want to read this. This is a depiction of a speech made by Asher Holmes, and I thought you might find it interesting. This is a speech that he made before the congregation, and Abel Morgan was the pastor at the time up at Middleton, and he says to the group of the church there, he says, "Our Monmouth County has taken the brunt of the worst of the rampaging of the refugees and Tories from New York and Sandy Hook. These criminals, beasts and vermin, have swarmed to our shores and attacked our villages and farms with inhuman ferocity and cowardly cruelty. These are not soldiers or warriors fighting for a just cause. These are greedy bandits lured here by our rich shores and prosperous farms to snatch away what livestock and silver and citizens to ransom that they can. I know that you live in constant fear of renewed attack, and I vow that my men-at-arms and militia are here to defend you to the last breath. I myself have been tested, listen to this, I myself have been tested on the fields of combat. I've recruited many of you to fight in the glorious cause of liberty. From the first protest we made against the hated Stamp Act and in support of those who dumped tea in Boston Harbor to the battles of Princeton, Germantown, Trenton, and Monmouth, we have stood firm, trusting in God's guidance. In spite of the callous thievery of the refugees and the marauding bands of looters on our shores, we hold fast. Our cause is just and our way is right, and so even though we walk in a hail of British bullets, we hold our heads high and keep our courage intact. In the Battle of Germantown 5 years ago, I remember being surrounded by redcoats in the midst of a fog of smoke and cloud, yet, in spite of the quantity of troops against us, and even with the firing of volleys of grape shot, still we had few casualties from our Monmouth militia. It felt to me as if God was guiding us forward through the shadow and midst toward the light. When the cause is for the right, then we look neither right nor left, but walk straight ahead, even if that is into the depths of the fiery flames of hell. I come as a member of this church, and I hope you will forgive my absence. I assure you, I've paid my dues.
Help.
I'll also stand as a descendant of Obadiah Holmes, whose inspiration brought this church to this land over 100 years ago. He didn't want anybody to forget what his grandpa had done, not only for him, but for everybody.
Amen.
And when we think about these things, fellas, what was tantamount in their mind was the liberty of conscience.
Amen.
And if we forget about that in this generation, we're sunk.
Amen.
We're sunk.